Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Vanishing Day, a Logan McKenna mystery, book 4 by Valerie Davisson, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue, September 2nd, 2016. She's here. Where? She and Shannon are across the street sharing an ice cream cone. There are benches along the boardwalk. Neil Everly adjusted his sunglasses. He continued to speak softly, even though there was plenty of cover noise in the coffee shop. It was a good spot. Traffic wasn't heavy, and he could keep an eye on them without being seen. They're sharing, he added, smiling. Shannon loved chocolate. So did her mom. I mean, what town, Neil? He knew what his boss meant, but right now they looked so happy. Lauren looked good. Sun-streaked hair pulled back from her face, tan, relaxed. She was laughing at something Shannon said. He never knew what that cute, dimpled little kid jabbered about, but she kept up a steady stream of excited chatter from her car seat all the way home from preschool every day. Neil relented. Jasper. They're in Jasper, California, he said. The moment's hesitation was not lost on his boss. Garrett knew he'd have to remind Neil who held his leash. One phone call is all it would take. But at least he found her. For now, he was still useful. Once he had Lauren and Shannon back home, he'd decide what to do about Neil. When she took off this time in July, Garrett assumed she'd come home on her own in a few weeks like every other time, or he'd find her. But this time she disappeared into thin air. No credit card receipts, no phone calls, no calls to friends. Not that she had many. But he knew she couldn't resist calling dear old Mom, Mrs. Stanton, Shannon's grandmother. It's the one tie he hadn't been able to break, and Lauren couldn't resist keeping. Even though Lauren had been intentionally vague with her mom on the phone, saying only that she and Shannon were in a little artsy town along the Southern California coast, she'd slipped up. Trying to reassure her mother that she and Shannon were okay, Lauren said she'd taken her daughter to a marine animal center, and Shannon had fallen in love with the sea otters. The little girl loved watching a young otter, the star of the show named Sadie, crack her seafood dinner open with a rock as she floated on her back in the pool. Yes, she was happy. Everything was okay. This wasn't forever. No, she couldn't tell her exactly where they were, but she'd find a way to call her again soon, maybe even FaceTime. Thrilled down to his marrow, Garrett listened to every damning word. He'd been bugging Grandma's phone. Stupid bitch. Lauren still tied to her mama instead of her husband. What had her mother done for her? He'd given her everything and she didn't appreciate it. He had her now. It didn't take him long to figure out that there were only 3 Southern California towns with sea otter exhibits. Long Beach and San Diego had sea otter exhibits but didn't qualify as small towns. Jasper, however, fit the bill. It was small, it was artsy, and it had a sea otter center of its very own. She see you? No. Good, keep it that way. She driving the same car? Yeah, I can see it from here, the Corolla. It's parked out front about a block away. Piece of crap. I gave her a brand new GLC and she's driving that? Did you get the tracker on? Not yet, too many people around. Labor Day weekend coming up. Well, when do you think that might happen, Neil? Tonight, once it gets dark and things get quiet down. There's enough holiday traffic and tourists around. I should be able to follow them then. If she lives in town, it'll be easy. If she's staying someplace more remote, it will be tougher. Fewer cars on the road. She'll recognize the Volvo if she sees it. Neil waited as instructed. He almost wished Lauren would see him and get away, but he did his job. Garrett owned him. Garrett hired him when no one else would, and he could send him back at any time. All he had to do was call up his PO and tell him Neil was out of state. But this was the last job he'd do for him. He'd find a way. He only had 10 days left on his parole. Keeping one eye on his quarry, Neil got up and paid his bill. Lauren was a big girl. She should have left Garrett years ago. Do you want me to call you? He asked. Silence filled the line for a few more seconds. Then, as if storm clouds had blown over, Garrett wrapped up the call. I'll call you. Have your phone on around 11 o'clock. That give you enough time? Yeah, she has to get Shannon to bed early, right? Neil said. She should. But who knows what she's doing now, and when I call, I want to hear you've got that tracker on that junk heap she's driving my daughter in. Okay, Neil? This is important, Garrett added. Neil sighed, as if he didn't know. Waiting until Lauren and Shannon started walking back to their car, Neil left the coffee shop and got into the Volvo. It was a tank. Garrett got it supposedly to keep them safe, but after a week or so of being their driver, he realized his main job was to keep tabs on the boss's wife. The engine started right up. Might as well get this over with. Tossing his phone back on his desk, Garrett Delaney leaned back in his chair, squeezing his eyes shut. Opening them, he scanned the opposite wall, not really seeing the muted gray wallpaper or the brushed steel sculpture in the corner blazing orange in the slanting rays of a late Seattle summer sun. He reached inside his desk drawer, deftly removing a small round white tablet from the blister pack stored there, downing it with the leftover coffee in his mug. Double shot. He flicked the drawer shut. Taking a deep breath, he swiveled his chair around to look out the window at Elliott Bay. Steepling his long fingers, he thought about next steps. The Adderall helped him focus. He found her. He always did. It was only a matter of time. She always gave in, but this time she almost made it. This time it had been very inconvenient and expensive to locate his own wife. That would not happen again. Once Neil secured the tracker, he'd have him lay low and monitor their movements until he could get there. He couldn't risk Lawrence spotting her former driver and getting spooked. Although with the electronics in place, at least he could find her easily if she sensed something was up. If Neil got the damn thing on tonight, his fur-jamo-clad foot shot out and kicked the wall. This was not a good time. He needed to be here, not 1,000 miles away in some little tourist town in Southern California fetching an ungrateful wife. He had business to take care of. Things were happening fast and not in his favor. Even if he could borrow Steve's Cessna, the trip would probably eat up at least 4 days. 4 days lost. A friend from college, Steve was the one who talked him into getting his pilot's license 5 years ago. And if he took the Cessna to California, he wouldn't even have to rent a car when he got there. Steve's wife was from Oceanside. He always had an extra vehicle or two stored with one of the small fixed-base operators, or FBOs, at Carlsbad Airport nearby. He checked on Google Maps. Carlsbad was about an hour south of Jasper, California. Doable. Garrett combed his fingers through the tight black waves he gelled into submission every morning, tugged hard at the roots until it started to hurt. For some reason, this helped. Why did Lauren have to do this to him now? She was so selfish. He had to hand it to her. She'd made it pretty far this time. He'd take her back, but she wasn't going to like the new rules. He might have to hire 2 Neils. A young woman with smooth, honey-blonde hair, secured at the nape of her neck with a large barrette, knocked lightly, opening the office door a few inches. Sheaf of papers in hand, she peered around the door and raised her eyebrows for permission to enter. Garrett swung his chair back around and leaned forward, arranging his face around a laser-whitened smile. Pale blue-gray eyes pierced her soft brown ones. "Hello, gorgeous," he said, hands folded in front of him on the desk. He had all the time in the world. "Hi, Mr. Delaney. Sorry to bother you again," she said. It had been a busy day. The phone hadn't stopped ringing. One of Mr. Delaney's clients had been particularly insistent. Didn't they realize he had more than one client? How was he supposed to get any work done if they kept badgering him to see how their money was doing? She entered and placed the papers on his desk, indicating the precisely placed yellow tabs on the edge of each page requiring his signature. "The mail guy comes at 4 o'clock now, Mr. Delaney, instead of 4:30 p.m. If you want these to go out today, I can come back to pick them up in a few minutes, or I could drop them off on my way home," she told him. "Not necessary, Patricia. You work too hard already. Here," he said, pulling the papers toward him. "I'll take care of these now." Patricia watched as he skimmed the documents and signed in the designated places quickly and efficiently. She loved the way his gold pen flashed in the light and his shirt sleeves rolled back several times to display very sexy forearms. Everything about him was sexy. Clean and sharp, dark hair against white skin. "The Black Irish I am," he told her one day with a wink. An indigo sweater contrasted nicely with his white shirt, sporting faint indigo stripes. The raw silk blue tie brought out his eyes. Straightening the papers briskly on all sides before handing them back to her, and recapping his Mont Blanc pan, he looked up, flashing her another brilliant smile. Signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. Mr. Delaney was so nice, taking time to take care of these so she wouldn't have to make an extra stop on the way home. They just didn't make men like him anymore. He remembered everyone's birthdays and even sent her mother a card when she was sick last year. His wife was a lucky woman. Thanks, Mr. Delaney, she said, hurrying back to her desk to get them in the envelope she already addressed and stamped. Garrett watched his assistant's attractive backside move from side to side as she walked away, keeping the smile plastered on his face until the door closed behind him. Why do they insist on being called administrative assistants? They're secretaries. Dismissing both secretaries and administrative assistants from his mind, he swiveled around to look out his window, pupils dilated, heart slightly racing, capping and recapping his pen.